It's now about 17 minutes after the hour of 7 o'clock on this Wednesday morning. I'm Kimberly D'Souza, and you're on the Now Morning Show. Now we're into the second week of school reopening for Term 3, and there's already so much going on and so much to talk about. And in studio with me to get an update on the experience and what the experience has been like for teachers, we have the first Vice President of TTUTA, Mr. Marlon Seals. Mr. Seals, good morning, and thank you so much for joining us on Now.
Good morning, Kimberly, and good morning to your viewing and listening audience.
Now, Mr. Seals, so of course, we've been seeing school fights. We have, suspected cases of COVID. Before we jump into that, though, what has the first week been like for teachers?
The first week, a little challenging, right? The members, the executive of TTUTA, district officials, we went out into the field to find out firsthand what's happening on the ground. We were startled because we recognized that the Ministry of Education had 2 years when most of these institutions were closed, and we expected that they would have done better. We are a little disappointed that they didn't use the time to bolster our infrastructure at the level of the schools, but we applaud our principals, because our principals went way beyond. Some of them going into their own pockets, Kimberly, to ensure that schools reopen on time last week. So we really see the work of our principalship, and we applaud them for their initiative.
Now, Mr. Seals, you mentioned the infrastructure because we heard actual reports on Monday where we saw, parents going back to the schools to pick up their children because they have been complaining about, lack of furniture, faulty equipment, that sort of thing. I mean, what are your thoughts on this?
Again, we are a little disappointed. We hope that the Ministry of Education will be honest with our public, so that they won't put our principals in a bad light. The lack of furniture in certain schools will, and I will show you, I will give you a real life example. Visiting a school in the Kearney district where the principal actually knocked together those benches in a primary school to ensure the opening of schools. But when termites eat into the furniture, that they leave jagged edges and what we call granny sugar, right? So granny sugar is on the ground, and a teacher coming to me to point out her ills and nearly slipped and fell on on the granny sugar on the ground. So it because of the lack of preparedness in our schools, we actually have health and safety concerns being developed.
Now, is it a case of trying to understand the work that the ministry had to do as well? Because in Parliament yesterday, the Minister of Education, Dr. Nian Gatsby-Dolly, said in particularly one school, I think they complained about the fumes. And what she was basically saying is that because the school was moved from the original structure to a room, they were getting the fumes from the paint. So it seems as if the ministry has been doing what they were supposed to do to get the schools ready. But in your opinion, was it enough? Was it too late? I mean, what are your thoughts on this?
Correct, because if we are speaking about, and I believe it's the Library School that she's speaking about, if that work was done, let us say it was done in the middle of the pandemic, that would have given the question of fumes in a school after a year. Because let me give you that scenario. When we looked at the reopening of schools in the phase 1, right, which was approximately a year within the pandemic, then, and if the infrastructure work was done then, we will not be having this conversation now. If in the reopening of schools phase 2, we had those infrastructure works done, we will not be having this conversation now. We are right now at phase 4 of the reopening of schools, and because we are now doing the necessary, we are having those conversations. That's not good enough. And we as a social justice organization, TTUTA, we cannot accept those kinds of excuses. Certainly not. Our children deserve better.
Now, since school reopened last week Tuesday, Mr. Seals, we have been seeing a number of school fights. Even in some of the videos that have been shared, on social media, we're seeing where teachers themselves are getting involved to try to part these fights, but it seems so very dangerous for them. I mean, what has TTUTA been advising their members to do in situations like these?
We recognize that because of the judge's rules, because of what is stated in the Children's Act, that it is that teachers as persons of trust need to do what is reasonable to protect our children. So, and then teachers by virtue of who they are nurturing. So they will want to stand in the gap. They will want to protect our children even against themselves. But we also caution our teachers. I had an example as a dean in a school in the north where trying to part a fight, one of the students just touched my wrist twice and my watch was gone. So we need to also do what is necessary as professionals in that to protect ourselves against harm's way, not put ourselves in harm's way, even though we know that we want to protect our children even against themselves.
Right.
Yeah?
Now, in the same vein of protection, we have been hearing about suspected cases of COVID-19 in the schools.
Yes.
What has TTUTA been advising its memberships to do? I mean, is it that the teachers are wearing masks in the classroom? Is it that they are social distancing as well?
Yes. Well, we no longer have social distancing, but we have personal space
yes.
in the school system. But we recognize that our members have to be vigilant all the time. There was a scenario at a school in the east, I won't mention the name of the school, but where our teachers were placed in a situation where they could have withdraw their services for the day, for the week, but chose a different way. Those teachers at that plant being proactive, knowing the situation, because according to WHO, there are 4 pillars for contact. Right? When they ask if you're in direct contact, they ask if you have been indoors for 15 minutes, unmasked, and within a 6 feet distance. 3 of those pillars that's how our teachers operate. That's the realm our teachers operate in. They are indoors in the classroom. They are within 6 feet of their students in crowded classrooms, and they are there for more than 15 minutes. The only thing that remains is the protection of the mask. So we implore our members, our teachers, to keep that provision in place. We also implore our teachers to be vigilant because our students are not keeping on their mask. We recognize that they are using it as chin straps and pirate and all sorts of things. It's everywhere but on their covering their face, their nose and their mouth,
yes.
Right? So we ask our teachers to be vigilant, not only for the safety of our students, but the safety of the teachers themselves and their families, because they are going home to their families.
Of course. Now, Mr. Seals, have we gotten any reports of teachers testing positive for COVID-19? And do you know what is the vaccination rate of teachers who have been vaccinated against the virus?
That information, because it is medical information, we are not at liberty to share, but we know that there is a high percentage of our teachers taking on the COVID, being both vaccinated and boosted, high percentage, and we in terms of the teachers coming down with
contracting
the virus, we do not have that information, and we are not at liberty, even if we had the information, to share that
at this point in time.
Yes.
Now, I wanted to pick your brain because we spoke to the TTUTA representative in Tobago, Mr. Braden Roberts.
Yes.
And he's saying that he understands the relaxing of the uniform dress code for students.
Correct.
But he had a problem with the messaging of it. It's almost as if the messaging is telling parents, well, you don't need to buy the uniforms now. Yes. And I wanted to get your thoughts on that, because I know we had a similar thing here in Trinidad,
yes,
where the Minister of Education said, okay, we're going to leave it up to the principals. The focus may not necessarily be on the uniforms now, but we want to get them back into school.
Correct.
Was something wrong with the messaging? Should parents still focus on getting the uniforms? I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
As a teacher organization, I will say this, right? I won't go back and forth on how the minister should have done what the minister should have done, but we will see that our principals have been, again, extremely stellar in the performance of their duties in most instances, where they, while accommodating the fact that everybody can't get their uniform at this point in time, they are saying that you should be uniformed, right? Basic minimum levels of uniformity happening at our schools, so you won't see persons going to school in cut-up jeans and that kind of thing, because we recognize what uniforms do. Right? It brings a unity among the students. It prevents against persons being bullied because they can't afford Versace, for instance. So we recognize the core of it, the purpose of uniforms, and working within the fact that a lot of parents can't afford at this point in time, still maintain the principle of having a uniform or uniformity at the school level.
I have two quick questions. You have 2 minutes. I'm going to try to get them in quickly. Now, Mr. Seals, I know that some people have been calling for school to close because we're seeing the increase in, well, not the increase, but we're seeing a number of school fires. We also have the problems with the repair works in school. Is the solution to close school and revert to a hybrid system?
No. I will say categorically no. If the reason persons are asking for schools to close, because they have the belief that if the ministry is given more time, that they will do what is necessary. I'm not convinced. The ministry, the evidence before us is that the ministry had 2 years with which they could have done what they're supposed to do. Why should we believe that if they are given 3 additional months, then they will be able to find their game? No. So, and we also recognize, again, as a social justice organization, that there have been missing students. What of those students? We the Trinidad and Tobago Unified Teachers Association, we have to advocate for those students, those missing students. So I will say no, but I am asking the ministry again to have this conversation with TTUTA on how we can do a hybrid system if needs be, how we can revert to online teaching, how the rules of engagement for online modalities.
Right.
Yes.
And final question, Mr. Seals. TTUTA Day, tell us about it.
Today is TTUTA Day. Our staff reps at our schools, many parents will recognize by now that schools are over a little early, just an hour early, because our staff reps at the level of the school, our staff reps will be our members will be engaging in choosing their staff representative at the school. Very important process, because the staff representative is tutor at the level of the school. Nice. So we need good representative on the ground so that we could have good representation at the higher levels.
And this is in Trinidad and Tobago?
Trinidad and Tobago, yes, that will be happening today. Exciting times, exciting times.
Of course.
Yes.
Mr. Seals, thank you so much for joining us here on the Now Morning Show. It's always a pleasure.
Yes.
I hope one day you will be able to give me some figures in terms of how many teachers have contracted the virus, because I know our viewers, certainly I want to know. But I know it is, an issue of, confidentiality and that sort of thing. So I won't push you too hard.
Okay.
But thank you so much for joining us. That was Mr. Marlon Seals, the first Vice President of the Trinidad and Tobago Unified Teachers Association, just giving us some thoughts about what's been happening since school reopened last week Tuesday. You're on the Now Morning Show. We have so much more coming up. Stay with us.